Throwaway time. Who here is a murderer, attempted murderer, assaulter, arsonist, destructor of some sort, drug manufacturer and or dealer, gang affiliate, rapist, pedophile, vandal, and or whatever else? What is your side of the story? My dad was cook for my entire life. I learned everything I know about cooking from him. He used to be a pilot. He had a pilot's license. He had all the gear, everything. Never questioned it. One day, while we were working together, it kind of popped into my head that I never knew why my dad was a pilot. Did he fly commercially? For fun? Who knows? I asked him, and he candidly gave me a nice account of his life. He used to fly sea and weapons out of the Carolinas into New York. Then he showed me his leg where he had been shot during a takeoff when they had done a deal and they opened fire on the plane as he left because they thought they had gotten screwed. He told me that when my mother was pregnant with me, that his drug connection people wanted him to work down in Cancun with them because they were opening a club. They had all the permits, they had the contracts, all of it paid for in drug and weapon money. My dad made the choice to not move to Cancun for me, as he wanted me to grow up in New York. Instead, his friends eventually opened the club. Everything was great. They kept asking my dad to come down and be their chef. They would pay for everything. They were making a ton of money. Eventually, the club was raided. It turns out all the permits they had gotten were part of a sting from the Mexican government. They knew the people who were opening the club were dealers and simply waited for them to pool all their connections in one place. Everyone was arrested and sent to prison. Some of them didn't get out of prison until the 2000s. I basically found out both my parents were doing C. Never would have even guessed it. He didn't regret it, and said that he still did it for fun about once a month. He stopped when a friend of his died suddenly of a heart attack after doing a bump and opening a bottle of beer in a bar. My dad eventually passed away from kidney cancer about a year ago this past May. I miss him every day, of course. He gave me my love of science and education, gave me all my appreciation for good, quality food, my sense of humor, too. I look just like him. And now I'm tearing up. What the heck am I doing in this thread? I had a plan to kill my mother but I never went through with it. The story is she was a rage addict that cleaned up her life and had actually become a drug and alcohol counselor when I went to live with her when I was 14. By the time I was 16, she had started to abuse prescription drugs and our relationship was getting increasingly more abusive. She would keep me up at night being loud and high. Sometimes she'd wake me up at random times to cry and tell me she wanted to die, that her life was miserable, and apologize for being such a crappy mom. Then in the morning, she would grab me by the ankle and pull me out of bed, yelling the whole time about how stupid I was and how ungrateful I was and how I was such a terrible kid. Looking back, it was a textbook abuse. One second she was telling me she was the only person who actually loved me, then next tearing me down, telling me I wasn't worth anything, that I shouldn't go to college. She tried to convince me not to go to school, or work or to hang out with my friends. She threw things at me, shoved me around, and would block the door when I tried to leave the room rather than fight with her. After months of escalating behavior, not being able to sleep at night, not having any food in the house except when I would buy it, I snapped. I started to plan a faked suicide. I was going to feed her every pill in her pill box, literally a 10-gallon Tupperware filled with pill bottles. The reason I didn't try is actually because other people tried to kill her before and it didn't work. Also, I wasn't really sure how I was going to get her to take all those pills without showing evidence of a struggle. Eventually, I broke down and told my best friend what was going on. She immediately told her parents and I went to live with her until I went to college. The other people tried to kill her before and it didn't work part is quite sinister. Like she's a modern day Rasputin or something. I have a kid with a girl I dated all throughout high school. When our son was 5 months old, things weren't working out between us and we split up. She started dating this guy that was a real piece of work. This guy was your run-of-the-mill piece of crap. He was 20 at the time and he already had a rap sheet that was 6 pages long. Was on probation because of about 15 breaking and entering charges and had a total of 20 years hanging over his head. He would just drink and do drug all day, not work, everything like that. He was also verbally and physically abusive. Where they lived was just around the corner from my apartment, so when crap got real, my ex would call me up to go over and help calm him down. He was kinda a coward and would usually get intimidated just by my presence and stop what he was doing as soon as I knocked on the door. There was one day that she called me up and when I got there she had blood in her mouth and he wasn't around. I immediately asked her what happened. I suspected he hit her, and she said that when he went to leave, she tried to stop him and she tripped and bumped her mouth. I didn't completely buy it, but that's not too unreasonable of an explanation. As I was leaving, he was coming back and when we passed on the stairs I looked him in the eye and said, "If you know what's good for you you'll never put your hands on her again." He laughed it off. About 3 weeks later, she called me again and I went over there. This time, they were outside and he had her pinned against the ground. I shoved him off and got in his face. He punched me once and on his second swing I ducked. I came back with a right across his face that sent him stumbling back. He tried to run away at that point so I tackled him. A short struggle followed and I quickly got him pinned in the same way he had my ex pinned. I mashed his face a few times and then got up. He stood up and started crying and screaming about how his arm was broken. I'm not quite sure how his arm got broken, but it definitely was. All I can imagine is that his elbow bent the wrong way when I tackled him. I don't feel bad about it. He had it coming. I wasn't caught. He didn't wanna bring the cops in on it because like I said, I have no criminal record and no probation and he had 20 years hanging over his head. He was well known by local cops as that kinda guy, so even if they did come, I could have told the truth and they probably would have arrested him and not me. The funniest thing is, he took his cast off after only 3 days, and it's been more than a year since that, and his arm is still fricked up. You should have brought the assault charges against him considering he was assaulting your ex. Assaulted you, and if your ex is not a Stockholm Syndrome victim here you'd have a witness who was also assaulted with a testimony, your testimony, and a history of violence against him. Better to put a pitiful frick like that in jail to get butt raped daily than let him stay on the streets. I assaulted many people at night. There was a lot of rape happening along the paths that follow the river through my town. I used to watch Dark Knight and do drugs and then go out looking for trouble. I got into a very serious altercation where the guy was essentially ready for me. I hit him in the face with a big branch and pushed him into the river, but he was following this girl for about half an hour. I watched and waited patiently. I used to watch Dark Knight and do drugs and then go out looking for trouble. Dopamine. But seriously though, you could have died. My ex-boss kept hounding me for 2 weeks if I could find him an ounce of some weed. One day he said that he had back problems and he really needed something. I felt sorry for him so I was able to find him an ounce of some bud and sold it to him. 3 days short of a year later I was arrested and charged with a felony. I don't sell weed. I'm not a dealer. I was able to pinpoint the only time I've ever sold anything to anyone. Now I'm stuck with a Class D felony for distribution of marijuana. Freaking sucks, man. I met a girl when I was 14 and stayed with her till 20. Something happened to her that changed her personality after a year together. I eventually learned she had been raped by the HVAC guy while her parents were a few hours away on business. I tracked him down and hospitalized him. Not comfortable saying more, because it was severe and I was never caught. The end. About 13 years ago my sister, young teen at the time, started dating her first boyfriend. Kid was 19. He was completely obsessed, would verbally abuse her, etc etc. As far as I know his abuse never got physical, but after she broke up with him he'd creep around our parents' house, call the house at 3 AM just to hang up, threaten her. He pretty much managed to pee me off. So, said guy worked at a driving school where he corrected test quizzes after hours. I drove there one evening with a friend to give him one last warning. He told me to frick off or he'd call the cops. So my friend and I took out my friend's aluminum baseball bat out of the trunk, tuned up the kid's car a bit and, when he came outside, took one good swing to his legs. Then I told him he could call the cops now. He never did. The phone call stopped. I never saw him again. Not quite the dramatic story, but it's all I got. Well, I was afraid you were going to beat him senseless with the baseball bat, but a good swing to the legs is a lot better. Not being sarcastic. This turned out better than expected. Not a throwaway. My family has about 700 acres about an hour south of where we live. I drive down there about 2 times every month in the fall and winter to hunt deer, dove and quail. Last winter I drive down and pull into the back of the property. I equip myself with my .40 pistol and sling on my 30-06 rifle. I like to walk the property because I think it is easier to sneak up on the wildlife than having a 4x4 scaring them off. I am walking around the property when I walk out of some trees and see a truck with 2 guys sitting on the tailgate with rifles and beers. I walk up to them very nicely and casual. They look at me and ask, "How's it going?" I said, "Fine, but why are you guys here?" They mumble a few words and they ask me the same question. I respond, "My family and I own this ranch." Then they look confused for a second and then one of them grabs his gun and proceeds to chamber it. I turn and start running my butt off into the woods. I hear 2 shots fired off in my general direction. I drop to the ground behind some brush, grab my 30-06, I chamber it, and look through my scope and point it at the mother who I think shot at me. I aim at his upper leg. I was about 75 yards away and a 30-06 shot at that distance would tear someone up. I shot and heard a terrifying cry. I get up and huff it back to my car and call the sheriff. They come out and I report the trespassers and told the sheriff the whole story. About 2 days later the one guy gets arrested at a local hospital for a gunshot wound to the hip. He now has to walk with a cane for the rest of his life because he tried to kill me and I would not let him. 10/10 would read again. I broke into my old primary school when I was around 8. I say broke in, I put my hand through the letterbox and turned the door handle. It was one of those safety doors that could only be opened from the inside. I then stole a few hundred elastic bands and ate all of the biscuits in the staff room. Rebel. Yeesh man. Thug life. Screw throwaways. I don't care. The cops knew. I once beat the crap out of my neighbor for bullying my brother and being overly sexual to my 10-year-old sisters. He had 4 inches and 40 pounds on me and I still won. He went to the hospital. I went home to tell my dad what happened. Got high fives and taken out for ice cream. That's awful heavy for such a short dong. A man tried to mug me and I proceeded to beat the ever-loving crap out of him for it. It was a fight or flight reflex and my instant, unthinking reaction was to go completely berserk. I kind of blacked out and had to be pulled off the guy and his whole face was bloody and he was unconscious. I got arrested and questioned and the police let me go because he decided not to press charges. My reaction was above and beyond acceptable force, hence the possibility of me being charged with a crime. Honestly, I don't regret it. Maybe the mother sucker will think twice before he approaches a 5 feet 2 inches woman and thinks he can scare her into turning over what little money she has. I thought you were some kind of man bear for a second. Vandal and arson. The neighbor down the street from us killed my dachshund. She was a little older than a puppy and very sweet. One night she tunneled out from our backyard and I had to run after her. I thought she was in some bushes but I was wrong. I was hidden behind these bushes when I saw my neighbor's minivan run her down. They backed up, hit her again, backed up, and ran her over once more before they left. For some reason I didn't feel like telling my parents that because it's a bad story. It was better to just say she didn't suffer and that it was quick. In the meantime I was breaking their sprinkler system and I sprinkled weed killer on their yard so the grass and flowers turned brown. They had 4 cars and I broke all their windows and stole all their radios. I had no idea how to steal radios so it turned out horrible. I ruined their wood paneling. The car alarms went off but no one came out. I carefully stuck nails into their yard by the ladder, by the recycling bin, and by the sprinkler timer so there would be a greater chance of one of them stepping onto the nails. They installed cameras by the house so I didn't want to risk going inside. When they installed the new glass windows, I broke them again and set fire to the inside. It didn't feel like anything. It was boring. I should have left her body on their pillow to remind them of what they did. I should have taken their miniature poodles and dropped them off at the Human Society several towns over. I should have taken a knife to all their furniture and left picture of dead dogs in every room of that house. I should have poured animal blood in all their bedrooms and filled all their orange juice milk with blood. But that requires energy I don't have. Well, that escalated quickly. A number of years ago I was at a party, heavily liquored up, when all of a sudden a fight broke out. When I noticed one of my friends was getting beat up, I jumped in to save him and thus got the crap kicked out of me by a number of coked out gentlemen. In the midst of the chaos and between consciousness drunkenness I managed to get the pocket knife out of my pocket and I latched onto the nearest sucker I could get my hands on. I ended up on the back of the biggest guy and I slashed across his neck. He made it to the hospital to get stitches and rather than press charges, declared a vendetta. The state thought differently and carried through with the charges themselves. They charged me with attempted manslaughter and assault with a deadly weapon. I took a deal and did 395 days in a medium security state penitentiary. I haven't seen him since, but I know we both have families, lives, futures. My only hope is that he has long since forgiven me and now lives in peace. The only thing I regret about the whole ordeal is that I didn't get to this thread any sooner. Someone raped a female friend of mine, and she wouldn't go to the police about it. The guy was drunk and forced himself on her. She doesn't drink. Caught the guy from behind one night by chance and beat and kicked the crap out of him. Took his wallet and left. Lived in a bad area at the time. A guy getting mugged late at night was nothing more than a statistic. I figured a completely random beating might have drawn more attention. I later found out that he'd done the same thing to at least one other woman. I have zero regrets, beyond not thinking enough to aim for his genitals more. I'm pretty sure I'd have a lot more trouble sleeping at night if I'd done nothing. And now he's been randomly mugged, he'll know to never rape again. Legally, I'm responsible for the death of my best friend and her unborn baby, my godchild. I've told this story before, but not on a throwaway, and the hatred I received, although there was also the kind words, caused me to delete my account. One guy threatened to talk to his uncle, a judge, to see if anything could be done to incarcerate me, but I just thought that was embarrassing, especially as I've been through the police stuff and there's nothing they want to do. Story time. My best friend and I were abused by my biological father. She turned to anorexia in the next few years to cope. She relapsed 200 times, hospitalized 4 times. She seemed better. I was dealing with my own stuff for a while and she was there for me, and was amazing, and everything a best friend should be. Then she got pregnant, by her boyfriend, although she was still only 16. Her body was still weak, she'd only had maybe 2 periods before this in the previous 4 months, and then came relapse. I noticed. I figured it out and I didn't want her to be mad at me. We'd only started repairing our friendship again and I didn't want to lose her. Ironic. So I didn't tell anyone. I assumed her love of her baby would cause her to eat for it. Her parents then figured it out. She invited me over, accused me of telling them and attacked me. She was freaking weak, but she threw things, a suitcase, for example, and eventually, to stop her, I hit her back. It wasn't a strong smack, but it was enough. She was hospitalized the next day and she lost her baby, and then, maybe 12 hours later, she died. Her face when her mum told her she miscarried still haunts me. I wasn't allowed to the funeral. I still don't know where her grave is. So I hit a pregnant anorexic. Eggshell rule says I'm responsible, but only after refusing to report a relapse. For selfish reasons. Have at me. I crashed a motorcycle with a friend on the back, who later died. She was rather drunk and in mid-left hand turn she leaned really hard to the right, causing the bike to hit a curb and both of us to fall off. I flew about 30 feet into some bushes and she fell straight down by the curb. It was about 2 AM so nobody else was on the road. She was unconscious the whole time. Ambulances came and took us away. She was induced into a coma. I went straight to jail to await her outcome. Once the family ended the life support I was sent to a state prison camp to finish out a year of incarceration. I had been drinking and it didn't improve the situation. I wasn't charged with a DUI, just vehicular manslaughter. I owe $500,000 in restitution for medical bills, and am a felon for minimum 15 years. I feel horrible for everything and would change it if I could. I am very fortunate to only go to jail for 1 year. Being in the real world is more difficult than I had thought it would be. Nobody will hire me due to the felony. I moved out of state to CA where the probation is much more relaxed and I am able to live my life, still no jobs. That sucks. A sad situation where both people were at fault, but the survivor takes the blame. Wear helmets. If you don't have 2 helmets, give your passenger the helmet. If you don't have 1 helmet, get off the freaking motorcycle. You aren't the only sober enough person on the road. Kidnapping, assault, vandalism and arson, I guess. Best friend's little sister was dating a guy in his late teens when she was around 15. When my friend found out, he hit her one night hard enough to break her jaw and then her arm after for a good measure. We snapped. The community in the area at the time was quite close knit and he was from a different part of town. So one night he was driving to our neck of the woods before he was knocked off the road by a diversion sign. His car got smacked into a tree and we pulled him out before throwing him into a van after setting the car on fire. Drove him south over the border after giving him a kicking and warned him if he ever came back near that part of town he wouldn't live to see it. After that we threw him out and drove back home. Needless to say, he was never seen in the area again. Also, the reason the police didn't do much was because this part of town was well known for constant hijackings, assault, sectarianism act, with a close-knit community people who knew weren't going to rat us out either. At first, I thought the girl's brother hit her and broke her jaw. I was confused as frick. Got caught with a shitload of Mary Jane. 120 hours of community service and 14 drug alcohol classes later I'm free. Newt Gingrich wanted the death penalty for anyone with 2 ounces. He would have killed me, twice. Victimless. Non-violent crimes shouldn't be handled so harshly. Had I had a record, or been a minority at the time, I'd probably be sitting in prison right now. My cousin was almost raped by a taxi driver. The same taxi driver is in a wheelchair now. I got a sunburn, but I'm in the Navy US, so technically that's destruction of government property. I'm not kidding. Arrest the sun now. That's a crime. Robbed an old lady drug dealer at gunpoint. The plan was just to get a lbs of weed, but it turned into this huge pain in the butt when we first showed up. The woman was a junkie, had junkies all in the house. I was getting pee off because she kept giving me and my friend the runaround. You should have seen her bathroom, it was full of holes from the junkies thinking the drywall was drugs. She had a 7-year-old son that got home from school and she had us watching him when she went out to go get the weed. I got even more furious when the little boy told me that her mother makes him play his video games on the computer so she can take her medicine. It was freaking solitaire on the computer. Anyway, she gets back and obviously it's short and somehow I got some pills that I didn't want because I'm guessing she thought she could steal from me. So we are in the back room and I pulled out a gun and told her I'm taking everything and the money. I'm not paying for crap. Also told her she was a horrible mother and I'm calling child services. She flipped out telling me she will find me and I was a dead man. When I left I called child services and never heard anything about it again. Good guy drug dealer. Removes drugs from the presence of children. Calls child protective services. A guy pushed me over in a bar. I'm a girl. This guy had previous for assaulting women. He had punched his ex in the face and had been to court for bottling a woman, but he was never sentenced because there wasn't enough evidence. But yeah, he pushed me over and I just snapped. I hit him in the face with the pint glass I was holding. The whole thing broke on his face. There was so much blood. The police were called. I was being really calm and coherent. I was cooperating with them so they didn't cuff me. I got in the car with them and was held in a call overnight. Couple of no comment interviews later and I'm free. Went to court and plead guilty. Got 180 hours community service, £285 fine and a 6-week exclusion order from bars, pubs and clubs. Looking back, I overreacted, but he really deserved it. I still have glass in my hand, and this happened about 2 or 3 months ago. TL. DR. Classed a guy for being a woman beating C. I read the TL. DR. And for a second I thought you nuked someone. I suppose in the eyes of the law I am. Last year I was convicted of GBH with intent. We were out one evening and my friend got in a fight with a guy. I didn't stop it and he ended up in hospital. Because I didn't stop it, didn't stop to help the guy afterwards and didn't phone the police, I was charged under a UK law called joint venture, which made me as legally accountable for his actions as he was. I got a 3-month custodial suspended for 1 year. My housemate got 3 years. The only reason I wasn't sent to prison is that I am currently at university and it would have cost me my place. Standing in court on my 23rd birthday being sentenced was the most ball-shattering, terrifying moment of my life. I killed a man. I have no regrets. I was never caught and in the same situation I'd do it again because I honestly believe it was him or me. He tried to mug me. I didn't let him. He got violent. When he pulled a knife I decided it was all or nothing, so yeah, he died. I didn't care, but I got away from the scene. I felt no guilt and I still don't, but I was terrified about being caught. It probably went down as just another drugged up scumbag getting his comeuppance. I broke his hand, crushed his throat, managed to get him over my shoulder so he fell head first onto the curb and kicked his sternum until it broke. I suppose that might have crushed his heart or something. Could have been the head versus ground thing too. I honestly don't care. He attacked. He had a weapon. I protected myself. One less butthole at large. More manslaughter than murder, but whatever. I killed him and I sleep easy at night. And that's why you don't team ugly Liam Neeson. The day I broke up with my ex-girlfriend, who had some mental issues, literally in and out of mental hospitals, etc. It wasn't all bad. We really were good together at the time. Is the day I had the police show up at my door. She claimed I beat her, raped her, tortured, and abused her. She had self-afflicted bruises, cut marks, and had been having consensual sex for almost 2 years at that point, which was somewhat common knowledge amongst both families. She eventually cracked and confessed to an investigator that she'd only done it because if she couldn't have me anymore, then I couldn't have anyone else ever. I never even hit my own sister when growing up, much less ever disrespected a woman, even if she deserved it. That entire following year was a social nightmare. So many rumors in school. After the ordeal, people seemed to be sympathetic towards me, but I was just happy to have my name cleared. When I was 15-16, I would often sneak into my friends' parents' rooms when I was over at their house and snoop through their mom's underwear drawers. I was pretty close friends with their families, so this was a real rush to me when I would do it, that I was going to get busted. I would never take anything valuable, just a pair of panties or a bra, either out of their laundry bins or from their dressers. This one time, my friend had to run out to the store to pick up a pizza we had ordered, and left me alone in the house while I played video games. As soon as he left, I bolted upstairs and dove into his hot MILF mom's laundry pile, and started jerking off with her panties and bras wrapped around my dong. I looked around some more, and found a buttload of dildos and sex toys in her storage trunk. I had hit the jack-off pot. Something came over me. All I could think about was these were in her pee. I tucked 2 of them into the waistband of my pants, bolted up the street to my house, where I proceeded to frick my butt and suck on them as I sniffed her panties. I was never caught, but I heard her mentioning to her son a few weeks later about some personal stuff that went missing from her room. She obviously knew it was one of his friends, but she never approached me about it, and I wasn't about to give them back. Come to think of it, dang, that was fun. Go to love your username. When I was an adolescent, I synthesized methamphetamine regularly. I obtained precursors, reagents and glassware from my school's chemistry lab. I was the TA and used online message boards to learn the synthesis method. Did small scale red, white and blue reaction. I also dealt drugs, methamphetamine, mushrooms, and marijuana. I traveled abroad numerous times, returning to the States each time with lots of hash for personal use and reselling. What can I say? I thought I was clever, and was incredibly freaking stupid. I'm immensely grateful that I never got in trouble. Now I'm a mostly law-abiding student and moderately successful artist. I still get those thrill-seeking urges, but try to keep my mischief to wheat posting and going 5 miles over the speed limit. Vandal here. First was when I was 15. I was having a hard time dealing with high school. I was bullied in middle school, but when I turned 15 I was taller than some of my bullies by almost a foot. Basically I just turned the tables on them when I started lifting and exercising, so the bullying stopped after I broke a kid's jaw in the locker room with his own boot. Fast forward to the end of the year and I've established a bad relation with the dean who hated me. She once said I was the worst kind of human being she's ever come across. Well, she gave me detention for defending myself from this kid who tried to jump me. He came up from behind and tried to jump on top of me. He mistook how strong and how much I actually weighed for a skinny kid. I was 210 pounds at the time, so when he jumped on my back and I didn't go down, I was just in full panic mode, so I jumped backwards onto my back and used him for a cushion. I get back up and he's stunned, so I grab him by the ankle and dragged him out the back door, across some pavement, over the blue crushed stone, out to the track field and behind the bleachers, where I told him that if he didn't leave me alone I was going to ruin his day. He starts kicking and spits in my face, so in front of the 7 kids watching I twist his ankle. There's a very distinct popping sound and he starts screaming. I broke it. His parents were actually very understanding about it, surprisingly. His dad said he didn't hold me responsible for defending myself because he had gone through something similar, and it was better that it was me in high school teaching him humility than someone outside of a bar later in life who may do far worse. I get called to the dean's office and she puts me in detention for a week because some of the kids had said he was bullying me and I was defending myself, so it was whatever. Well, Thursday rolls around and I get called to the dean's office again and she says I don't think the punishment was suitable enough, so I'm tacking on another week plus an in-school suspension and a Saturday detention. I flipped crap and called her every word I could think of. 2 weeks later I keyed the crap out of her car, let the air out of the tires, not slashed, and pee in her gas tank. The school questions me about it and they had no evidence it was me. I later found out I'm one of 6 students to have done this to her during her tenure at our school. So what does that say? I eventually fessed up to it and the police arrested me for vandalism. It was a dumb mistake forged through my angsty youth and being young and stupid. I do not regret it though. I have since paid my parents back for the damages. I kind of wish I knew everyone on this thread. I was sexually abused and raped for 5 years by my martial art instructor. He did this to countless girls and women. When it all came out when I was 18, no one went after him. He did only 3 years in jail. He was convicted of raping me for 5 years and molested 2 other girls for 4+ years, but admitted to 12 girls as young at age 9. His wife married him in Vegas during the trial. He is now back living in the same house, a few blocks from a school, in the same very small town that I have to pass through to go to my childhood home. Don't get me wrong, I have a fantastic life now and I'm extremely happy where I am at, but I'd always wished that someone would have stood up for us and kicked the living crap out of him. It looks like a lot of you guys would have. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.